Good afternoon, Brant. How are you?
I'm doing great. About yourself, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. It's a Tuesday here near the end of September. Actually, it's crazy. It's almost October already. I can't believe it. But yeah, I'm doing well. It's feeling like fall where I am, and kind of leads me to the question for you. Kick off is, or not even a question. Love if you would introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, where you are in the world today, and anything else you'd like to share with us before we kick off here.
Sure. Well, my name is Brant Menswar. I am a core values activist, speaker, and author. I am a retired rock star, spent 20 years in the music business.
Nice.
And I am speaking to you from Cocoa, Florida, which is just inland from Cocoa Beach, where we have two seasons of hot and hotter.
Hot and hotter. So it's kind of the opposite of up here in New York.
It's the
What's
truth.
what's the temperature like down there today?
It's 90.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
we're in the hot.
Yeah, man.
Believe it or not, there's a hotter.
Yeah. So we'll get to know each other here as we talk today. I'm from Minnesota originally. So for me, too hot is over like 85. I'm like, no. And
Oh,
especially Florida humidity. No,
yes.
thank you. No offense. No, thank you.
No, I got up and walked this morning at about 6:30 because that's the only time you can go and do that without just full on having a heart attack in the
Yeah,
middle of the
it's
street. Yes.
brutal, man. That's brutal. Well, so we're going to get into everything you just talked about. So in Florida, where are you originally from?
Originally from Manchester, New Hampshire, born and raised.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe it isn't it called Manchester? How do you say it in New Hampshire?
Yeah, that's right. Manchester. That's right.
Manchester.
That's right. We are just a little up further north of Worcester. And,
There it is.
it's where we park the cars and Harvard Yard and we party and all those sorts of things. Get out of here,
That's
kid. How
all.
you like them apples? Yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I see you've got it down. So you've either never had that accent or you've done a really good job of training yourself out of it because
I
I don't hear that at all anymore.
yes, I have not lived there since 1989. So it
Okay.
has left my vernacular for the most part.
Nice, nice. Well, let's get into it. We got a lot to talk about today. I know you've got some exciting announcements, and I'm always interested in talking to musicians. I'm a very amateur musician myself, so I'm sure we'll get into that too at some point today.
Sure.
So, you ready to rock,
Let's do
literally
it.
and figuratively?
Yeah.
All right. So, Brant, first question for you: what's something that you nerd out about?
Hmm. So I think there's a couple of things for me. So I nerd out on sports quite a bit. Whether
Hmm.
that's being sort of born and raised just outside of Boston, it's in your blood. So it's Patriots, it's Celtics, it's Red Sox,
Mm.
it's the entire culture up there. And
Sore, a
yeah,
little bit of a sore subject with the Celtics. My
yeah,
condolences.
ugh,
And living in Florida makes it even worse.
I know. And I've got mixed feelings about Brady now playing for Tampa Bay. At least he's sort of in my
Right.
in my backyard, but
Yeah.
it still hurts a little bit.
Yeah. Condolences.
Yeah. Yeah. And then outside of that, I would say, I like am a geek on behavioral science. Like that to me is one of the most fascinating things, sort of why we do what we do. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I have a tendency to nerd out over data with regards to those things.
Hmm.
And it's really sort of honestly served me pretty well in the last 6 or 7 years of being able to use some of that data and research to really craft what it is that I talk about and
Yeah.
driving that behavior change that I want to see from people.
Yeah. Do you know Vanessa Van Edwards?
I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah. She was a guest on the show, about 20 episodes ago or so. She's somebody, she runs a company called The Science of People.
Mm,
And it's specifically in the realm of things like body language and
yeah.
likability.
Yeah.
So it's like a scientific approach to all that. She's a best-selling author as well. There's a book called Captivate that if you haven't read it, you probably would find it interesting.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
it's a She's a really cool person. She's a speaker as well, and specifically, I did her body language course because I was really fascinated by it and learned a ton about like why people do things both from a body language perspective, but why people make decisions and I'm getting into your area of expertise, but why they don't actually make the decision and they just do it without like
Yeah.
subconsciously making decisions, which is, like I'm a coach. So I get into some of this stuff and we call it like survival mechanisms or your subconscious ways of being. But yeah, she's somebody you should definitely check out. She's really great. She has some awesome content out there.
Yeah, I love that. I've got a good buddy, Mark Bowden from
Yeah.
Canada, that's also in the body language game, and his TED Talk is just one of my favorites of all time. How he basically manipulates the crowd into liking or disliking him in the
That's
moment.
amazing.
It's just so good.
Yeah. So Mark, that's interesting you bring up Mark. I don't know Mark, but we are connected on LinkedIn, and I think it's probably because I'm connected with Vanessa. I would be shocked if Mark and Vanessa don't know each other, since they seem to be kind of the two like straight up body language people out there.
Yeah, I agreed. They've got to. He's fairly well connected across the globe, and we just had him on our podcast that we host, and he's just such a fascinating guy, like one of the smartest guys. It's not just about the body language; like he's a Renaissance guy. He knows all about the art world. He knows like literally a lot about a lot, and that always makes for a great conversation.
Oh, that's cool. Maybe to get an introduction to him, see if he wants to come on my show as well.
Sure.
I see. I see him on LinkedIn, and he posts a lot of good stuff. But enough about Mark. I want to focus on you today.
All right.
And what other questions I have about sports? So you're from, the area. So you were a Brady fan.
Yeah.
And who is your all-time Boston sports hero?
Probably Larry Bird.
I love Larry.
I grew up most of my childhood watching him play with my grandparents, and on the Sox side, gosh, Roger Clemens and Dennis Eckersley, and sort of the '80s clan of Freddie Lynn and all of those guys who sort of were from that era.
Yeah.
Just huge fans on that side. Even, going back really, I mean, before Brady, we sort of, even in the Steve Grogan days, man, during when we try to find a glimmer of hope during the Grogan years. But yes, even with the bad uniforms and the awful logo and everything else that we had going on back then. But, I had an opportunity a few years ago to speak at Gillette Stadium, and after the event, they brought me down into the locker room, and I got a chance to sort of hang out. And I laughed because, the Patriots are the ultimate sort of gamesmanship type of people. So one of the things that I found out while I was doing the little backstage tour back there was that the distance from the field to the Patriots locker room, it's like, 50 feet, and they're in.
That's it.
Yeah, it's like once you get off the field, it's like 50 feet and you're in the locker room. For the visitor team, it's a 3.5-minute walk.
That's so not surprising.
Right?
So not surprising.
They make them walk 3/4 of the way around the stadium. So they have an extra 6 to 7 minutes of planning during halftime.
Of course they do.
Is just, you got to love it, man. I'm sorry. There's some Patriots haters.
Yeah. I'm just imagining Belichick's like, hey, I got an idea for you here, architects, designers. Let's put our locker room here. Yeah. And we'll put these guys over here. Yeah.
I laughed. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at all the different lockers there. And so, I'm looking at Gronk's, and it's loaded with, protein powder and all kinds of stuff. And I'm looking at Edelman, and he's got the same. It's all the shakes and the supplements. Yeah. And I look at Brady's, and it's nothing but hair care products. That's pretty much something.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. I just, one more thing before we move on.
Yeah.
I grew up a big Kevin McHale fan, because he's from Minnesota, played at University of Minnesota. So he was a local hero for me. He's from like small town in upstate Minnesota. It's called Hibbing, or maybe he's from Bemidji, but so I always grew up like a Celtics fan in the '80s because of Kevin McHale.
Can I can I have an honest conversation with you about Kevin McHale?
Yes.
I met Kevin McHale in Minnesota
Yeah.
at the airport.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, he was the biggest a-hole I have ever met.
Like, he didn't want to even engage with you?
There were like 3 people waiting for bags, and I am sitting there and I'm like, gosh, I got to say something. It's Kevin McHale. I'm like, come on. So I said, excuse me, Kevin, I just wanted to tell you, big fan. Most of my childhood was literally incredibly fond memories of sitting with my grandparents watching you play. And I wanted to thank you for that. He like literally looked at me like, how dare you?
Oh my God.
And then he didn't even say thank you. He sort of gave me a little head nod and turned around and walked away. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, if I ever get successful enough to have somebody walk up to me and thank me for something, it's like, and if that's, full permission to kick me straight in the junk, I can't stand that sort of a thing from people who lived a privileged life and experienced an incredible amount of success and made their living off the backs of people willing to pay to watch them play. The least they can do is simply smile and say thank you. But
that's a bummer.
It is a bummer, man.
Maybe he was in a bad mood over just being when he
with the Timberwolves,
coached the Timberwolves. It was not a good 10 years. Maybe
true.
Maybe you caught him on a bad day. I don't know.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt just because I can't think of him that way. I'm like,
that's right. Right. Yeah, exactly. I had a run in at a celebrity. It was like a pro-am golf tournament that the company I was working for, we were sponsors. So I didn't golf with this person. I'll leave his name out. But when I tell you he's a very famous basketball player, he's a very, very, very famous basketball player. Same experience, but almost worse, because we were golfing together, and it was just like at the clubhouse at the end of it.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even look up. My friend said something to him for his son, who was like 9 at the time, and this person wouldn't even look up. I'm like, come on, man. Like, I've got your jersey at home. Like, dude, like, come on. We're all human beings here.
Agreed. But it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Totally.
Anyway, so let's move into the topic of comfort zones, which, I'm sure this is interesting for you, being like a study of somebody who studies the human nature. So for you specifically, Brant, what's something that's inside your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's? And I'm going to caveat this, like I do when I have speakers on, and say you can't say public speaking, because that's just way too easy.
Yeah, it is. That's low hanging fruit. I would say for me, it's there's a competitiveness within me that is unnatural. It is semi-destructive, where most people would just be like, all right, this isn't worth it. Those words have never come out of my mouth. Wow. I don't care if it's Chutes and Ladders or, we're playing Scrabble. I don't just want to win. I want to win by enough margin that you will never ask me to play again.
Oh God, you're a dominator. Yeah, I feel you.
Yes. So that for me, that's that. And then also, what I would say is having like real vulnerable conversations with people, like getting real with them and having a conversation that might be uncomfortable for them, comes fairly easy for me, just because it's sort of what I do, and you can't get to the truth without having some uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Remind me if we ever get a chance to meet up in the real world after this pandemic, that I pick something for us to play that I have a chance at. Well, I'll have to vet you out, because I'm also an extremely competitive person. I mean, as a kid, I was a nightmare as a kid. I played a lot of sports, and I was good at them, but I was also just an absolute nightmare. And same thing when you said Chutes and Ladders, like my parents have stories of me playing like Candyland and Chutes and Ladders, and I would like actually turn over the board and walk away if I didn't win.
I love it. I love it. Listen, if you learn to package that up and control it, it serves you well for the rest of your life. It just
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So I try to turn that potentially damaging thing into superpower, which I think I've been mildly successful at.
That's fantastic.
So for you, Brant, what's something on the other side of that? So something that's outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's.
Um, I so there's a couple of real things. Like I do not like crowds at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get
Wait,
them.
you're a public speaker and a former rock musician, and you don't like crowds.
Yes. Like I'm okay being in front of a crowd by
Mm-hmm.
myself or with some bandmates on a stage in front of a sea of people. But if you placed me in the sea of people, incredibly uncomfortable.
Wow, that's so
Incredibly,
interesting.
incredibly uncomfortable. Like the same as I am with heights. Like if you ask me
Yeah,
to change a light bulb and it's above the third rung of that ladder, you're gonna have to find somebody else. I just can't do it. I can't get my body to do it. And
yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things that for me, it's just I had a really bad experience with a crowd. Gosh, in the early maybe it was I think it was around 2005. I was playing a show in England at the Greenbelt Festival, which is this
Mm-hmm.
huge arts and music festival over in just west of London. And I went to the Reading Festival, which is a gargantuan music festival, while I was over there going on at the same time to go support a band that was part of our management companies. They managed them as well. It was a group
Yeah.
called Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. And I mean, they were playing for 40,000. They were on main stage. They got called at the last second because one of the bands, somebody got hurt and they couldn't perform. And so they got sort of gifted this opportunity to perform right before Beck.
Oh wow.
And it was, so everybody's sort of getting their place to be there for Beck's performance right before, and there's probably 40,000 people, and like when that crowd decides to move, you move. Whether
Yeah, you
you
don't have a
want,
choice.
yeah, that's right, and it's like it's scary because if you fall, if you stumble, and the problem is there's people like everywhere. There's literally feet below your feet. There are people who are tripping and falling, and like it was such an uncomfortable experience to be in the middle of that without any control whatsoever. That like I've never put myself in that scenario again, and it's been the better part of 20, almost 20 years that
Yeah.
I've just refused to put myself in that position.
Yeah. So I've got something that's probably your worst nightmare.
Hmm.
A stage dive.
Oh yeah, no.
you're like
No,
you're like I got to jump
no.
off heights and land in a crowd. Like that
Yeah.
is your worst nightmare.
Yeah. First of all, I exceed the weight limit for that move. You got to be a waif to jump, unless you're playing for, the local prison or something that's got some
Yeah.
guys who can handle it. It is
Yeah, like a Mick Jagger or
I'm
something.
a I'm 6'1", 210. So if I jump off that
Oof.
stage, there's some damage to be ensued. I laugh at all of my buddies who do that because they are, they're 6 feet tall, but they weigh 135 pounds, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, grab your skinny jeans and run. That's the
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those. That was super interesting. So next question I have for you, and this is probably going to be an easy one for you, but
Okay.
maybe not. I don't know. I've had some speakers I've asked this of in there, and because speakers don't generally speak for 5 minutes unless
Mhm.
you're in Toastmasters.
Sure.
So if I give you 5 minutes
Yeah.
and you get to deliver a speech to the world, the whole world,
Yeah.
what would you give your speech on and why?
I'd give my speech on the world needs your unique contribution.
Uh-huh.
And you've got to figure out how to do it because it's not easy. And if you just continue to wing it for your life, you'll never experience what's possible for you in your life.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, that that lends itself directly to the kind of work I do.
Mhm.
and getting clarity on that. So I'm interested from your perspective. Got listeners out there and they're like, wow, that's yes. And either they don't know what their unique perspective or their unique contribution is,
Mm-hmm.
or they have an idea, but they don't know how to start, or they're scared to start.
Sure.
So, I think that like the easy layup here, we'll go back to some sports stuff. The layup here is like a career change, right? Where like there's so many people in jobs that they just don't give a crap about.
Yeah.
And they know that it's not contributing. That was my career prior to doing my own thing as well. And they like, oh, like there's something more, that the world is, the universe is calling to me to do this thing. I want to make an impact. I want to contribute, but I just don't know how to begin. Do you have any advice for the audience on that?
Yeah. So the work that I have been doing for a couple of years now, specifically around helping people discover their non-negotiables, these core values, right?
Mm-hmm.
I call them your black sheep values. And that's because I was 47 years old when somebody finally told me why farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock. And I was so blown away by the truth that it's what led to this book, right? And so the truth is that the reason that farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock is because a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So in effect,
right.
every black sheep is 100% authentically original. And when I heard that, it really made me feel and take me down this path that we all have what I like to call a flock of 5 black sheep values. These are values that have been cultivated over the course of our lives. Most of the time, they are fully formed by the time you are in your early 20s. And it is something that a fraction of a percent of people take the time to discover what their non-negotiables are. They know what's important to them, but there is a mile between important and non-negotiable. And that is really, for people who are struggling, it's because they're getting confused by things that are important rather than focusing on their non-negotiables.
I love that, Brant. Man, this so resonates for me. If I could just share something that when I start working with a new client, we talk about something in the vein of this, and obviously black sheep is your thing.
Yeah.
Which is way more interesting than the way I view it. But it's like, what are you truly committed to?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's kind of non-negotiables. And this is something that I've worked on over the last couple of years. And I have clients go down to 3. I think the number is probably a bit arbitrary, but you probably know more about it than I do. Maybe 5. There's actually something in the number. But what I came to for myself that are non-negotiables, well, the one thing I came down to, one thing that's actually non-negotiable for me is that I have to think things are fun. Okay. And so I know that not everybody, like, they're not committed to. In other words, like, I'm committed to fun. So this podcast came out of me wanting to have fun with it. Yep. Having you on the show is somebody I think would be fun to have a conversation with. How do I run my business? And I actually picked this up from Tim Ferriss. Mm-hmm. He had I don't know if you ever heard this story, but when he wrote Tools of Titans a few years ago, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago now, he got really stressed out because that was a big undertaking, right? I think he was interviewing like 100 different people, like Schwarzenegger, Mark Cuban, like all these, like what you call high performers. And he got really stressed out. And then he looked at it from a different way, and he almost quit. He almost didn't write the book. And he actually said, what would it look like if this was easy?
Yes.
So for me, like, my version of that is, what would it look like if this is fun? And yes, there are going to be things that aren't fun in life. Yep. So I'm curious for you, before we go into the commercial break, what would it look like if it was blank for you specifically?
It has to be filled with hope for me.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. So if you see something that feels, if you intuitively sense that something is hopeless, or you're not seeing the possibility, it's likely not going to be a place you're going to go down.
Correct. Or I'm going to find a way to present it in the light of hope rather than
that's awesome.
What it is. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, Brent. Well, we're going to take a really brief commercial break, and we'll be right back after that.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
And we are back, Brent. So I love this. We've kind of started to touch on you, like a holistic picture of you. So what we know about you so far is you're a musician, but we don't know what kind of musician you are. So I'm curious about that. And you're in a rock band. We know that you are a speaker, and you've also alluded to being an author. So this is the part of the show where if you can just share with us your journey to like what led you to today. And today's a big day for you, which I'm excited for you to talk a little bit about. What led you to today and what you're up to in your life right now.
Yeah. So I came out of college not knowing at all what I wanted to do. I had planned on playing professional baseball. That was my plan A, and I did not have a plan B. And I got hurt and could no longer play. And so I had to pivot fairly quickly. And that pivot took me the better part of 25 years to figure great. Out. And so,
sorry, I just want to ask you, what was your position in baseball?
I pitched.
You pitched, and did you play in college?
I did. I played at Florida Southern. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Did you get drafted into the majors?
I got hurt during that process. Yeah.
Oh man, that's got to be a killer.
It was. That was my whole life.
I can imagine.
I literally went to college to play baseball, not to learn.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, that was not on the agenda, and so all of a sudden I found myself, having to figure out what was going to come next. And I just didn't really know. I met my wife in school. We got married like 3 weeks after we graduated. And,
nice.
I tried all kinds of things when I first got out of school. So I studied to be a gemologist for a year with Mayer's Jewelers.
Amazing.
Right.
I could see the natural progression from being a baseball pitcher to being a gemologist. That just makes total sense to me.
It's just stupid, but it fascinated me. And so when I learned that rubies and sapphires are the same stone and it just depends on where they grow, I'm like, okay, I need to know more about that. Right. And so it sucked me in. And so I studied diamonds for almost a year and realized that I really did not like that business. It took me a year to figure that out. But after that, I sold. I was just a salesman, so I sold everything you could possibly imagine, from insurance to hot water, solar hot water heaters to air conditioners to water treatment systems to you name it. I did in-home sales. I did, a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
and always, found success and made money, and so that doesn't really help you hone in on what your purpose is.
Totally.
And so, it sounds like a total D-bag thing to say, but when you're good at a lot of things, it actually can hurt you from finding what you're meant to do. And, and that was sort of where I was. I found success if I put my mind to it. I had the skill set to be successful in the areas that I was working. And what I realized is that I was chasing the money.
Yep.
And I wasn't chasing, maybe what I felt like I was supposed to do. And so before long, I ended up in the commercial collections business.
Oh my God.
And
I was going to say, like, if that's anybody's life's purpose, you can send them my way. We'll do some coaching if that's your,
yes.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I, moved from Florida to Boone, North Carolina, in the middle of the winter. and with my wife and my newborn at the time. And, it was crazy, but like, yeah, these are people who make ridiculous amounts of money. Like the quarterly bonuses are six figures, and you're just like,
wow.
oh, okay. So, that to me, I had a buddy who was sort of selling things in home sales with me. And then he moved away and went to work for this company. And 6 months later, he's like, hey, this is legit. You need to come up here and check this out. And so
yeah,
I went up and interviewed and got the job and got into their management training program and was there for 9 months. And they moved me back to Florida. And that led to the better part of half a decade in that business, where I just sort of worked my way up to the number 2 spot in the company and had an enormous amount of success, making a ridiculous amount of money at a very young age.
Yeah.
And then we got bought out. And when we were acquired, they got rid of everybody. And so
oh, wow.
I was out of work and I couldn't find a job because I was making too much money at in 25, 6, 7 years old. And every job I was looking at was like a fourth or a fifth of what I was making. And so they were afraid that if I took the job or they hired me as soon as something else came along that was better, I would leave.
Because you would probably.
Yeah. And so I couldn't blame them. And so, right around that time, I had sort of felt this call into what started as music ministry.
Oh, okay.
And so that led me to record my first record. Just, on a budget, not really expecting too much. I just wanted to go out and play, some coffee shops, some churches, some whatever. And that was in 2001 or 2. And by 2003, I decided that I needed to do this full time. It was a feeling it was a calling. It wasn't like, hey, I think I'd like to do this. Like I'm feeling a true calling, which I would only describe as when you don't answer that calling, you feel like you're being disobedient, right? To whatever God you choose to follow. And that to me was a something that just I was obsessed with having to do this. And so it was distracting me from anything else. And so I quit my job, sold the house and took that little money that we made and sort of used that to launch this idea of me being a musician, a recording artist. And that first year I played about 75 shows all over the country in different coffee shops and churches and had some success and was able to continue to play and have some songs that I recorded that did well on the radio at the time. And so that led to being sort of partnered up with a concert promoter to meet some fellow bandmates that we put together a band and signed our first record deal in 2006.
Yeah. So Brant, just a question for you about that. Yeah. So you were a solo artist when you started out?
I was, yeah.
And so you're like a singer-songwriter. You play.
Yep.
I'm going to assume you play the guitar then.
Yes.
Gotcha. And you were writing all your own stuff, performing.
Yeah. Yes.
Gotcha. Nice.
That's
cool.
It.
And then
that's it.
Yeah. Okay. And then you actually got hooked up. Somebody saw you and said, "Hey, this dude's talented. Let's get him connected with a band and see if we can grow your brand, grow your musical career." Nice.
Yeah. What ended up happening was there was another singer-songwriter who was a super talented guitar player, like a lead player. And he didn't really want to be a singer-songwriter. He wanted to be a guitar player for somebody else. And so that sort of, we got hooked up together. And so he became my guitar player that we would go out and do these shows together. And then I took him to England during that time I told you about. And while we were there playing, we happened to meet this band from Australia called River Tribe that, they played crazy instrumentation like didgeridoos, darbuka drums, djembes, just they basically played house trance music live with all of this type of instrumentation.
That sounds awesome. That sounds very cool.
It's mesmerizing to watch. and they were breaking up. And so one of their bandmates, we just were sitting around the hotel after playing one night and, having a few drinks and we just got into chatting with him and said, "Hey, what do you think about coming over to the States and doing some touring with us?" And so he did. And we ended up forming a band called Fort Pastor, which was funny because everybody thought that it had something to do with the Christian market, but it really didn't. It was named after a zombie movie.
That's awesome.
Which that changed the conversation at every Christian radio station that asked us, tell us about your name. Oh, it's from a zombie movie from the 60s. And they were like, oh, okay, let's move on. And, we signed our first major record deal in 2006. And we were together for 3 years and decided to sort of leave our record deal and the tail end of 2008. And our Aussie went back home to Australia to get married and have some kids. And I became the artist in residence at that time for the Not for Sale campaign, which is one of the largest anti-human trafficking organizations in the world. And so for 2 years, I traveled around with the founder of that organization, Dave Batstone. And we did this multimedia show every night. So we'd go to these theaters and I would do a concert and he would tell stories in between. And there was a bunch of sort of video and we would talk about modern day slavery and how people are contributing to it without even realizing that it's there. And I did that for 2 years. And
it's fascinating.
Played a whole bunch of churches, again, some of the biggest churches on the planet, and from Rick Warren out in California, to,
Saddleback, to
Hillsong in Australia, and we really Willow Creek, and all these different, just incredible places. And I really sort of felt like, gosh, maybe pastoring is going to be my retirement plan. Like when I get off the road, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And, Brant, did you want to do, you wanted to like worship arts pastoring? Did you want to be like a executive pastor? Like what kind of pastoring? Just like a lead pastor for a church?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Just someone who preaches, sings, does a little bit of everything. Right.
Yeah. Were you looking to found a church or
I wasn't.
Work for a place?
Here we go. I wasn't looking to do that. I just wanted to get plugged in, but the sort of the blessing and curse of playing hundreds of churches over a couple of years is you see things done really well, you see things done really bad, and everything in between. And so that's sort of where, I'll give you the perfect example. I was playing this mega church in Atlanta, and I am getting ready. I have a little thing that I'm doing in the service that day, and I'm back. This place seats probably, 7,000 people, something like that.
That's massive.
It's massive, right? And so I'm back at the sound desk, and I am sitting there, and the service starts. And as the service starts, the sound guy sits down in his chair, grabs a magazine, and starts reading. And I go, shouldn't you have your fingers on the knobs? And he said, this is all pre-recorded. These guys are on the worship team's on staff, the whole band.
Right.
So we pre-mix this during the week. So there's really nothing for me to do. So I said, well, what if the Spirit moves and someone wants to sing an extra chorus? And without missing a beat, he looked me dead in the eye and he goes, the Spirit doesn't move here.
That's perfect. Right? You're like, do you understand mega churches? There's no Spirit moving. This is a finely honed and finely choreographed show. We're putting on a show here. Let's be very clear.
That's exactly right.
Like you've ever been to Broadway where they're just like winging it? That doesn't happen.
No.
That's amazing.
Right? And
the Spirit doesn't move here.
The Spirit doesn't move here. And I just went, oh, okay. All right. And so, I was like, I guess, God's got 8 bars. And if he can't get it done, you better You better brush up there, brother. You got limited time here to get your work done. And so, I came out of that whole experience and sort of came back to Melbourne, Florida, and, was asked to be a worship pastor at a fairly large church here, and said no for the better part of 6 months. And they just kept hounding me. And so, I decided I was going to make a ridiculous list of demands, like stupid. Like, this is, you don't do that. And I don't recommend this, but for me, I didn't want to do it. So I'm like, I'm just going to give them a list of, I'm not going to your stupid meetings. I'm wearing what I want to wear. I pick the songs. You don't get a say, like I literally, just because I've had a really contentious relationship with some of these churches. And so, they said, okay. And then I was like, well, shit, now I'm screwed. So, I didn't quite know what to do. So I went to work there for a couple of years, and just it was fine, but it wasn't what I felt church should be. Yeah. And so, I decided I was going to start one on my own, with about 5 families in my living room in 2009. And within a year or so, we had about 400 people. And so
where did you meet?
Well, we went from my house to, believe it or not, to City Hall.
City Hall. I've never heard of a church meeting at City Hall. That's amazing.
We met for 8 weeks in the judge's chambers in City Hall, where we would talk about being a non-judgmental church.
That's amazing.
I mean, it was ridiculous, but we had the ability to by law, we could use it for 8 weeks, and then we couldn't hold a religious service there any longer. And so we had grown so quickly that we were able to find a space in a strip mall. And then had outgrown that and moved into a much larger space. And then we just, we probably moved 4 times in a couple of years because we just kept growing. And then sort of, I thought that was going to be it. I had a couple of co-pastors that I had met up with, and they are like that. They're career pastors, right? And so I needed that because I was still touring. So for me, it was like, when I'm here, but when I'm not, someone's got to be here to make sure this happens. And so, during that tenure, my oldest son got really sick, and he was diagnosed with this rare blood cancer in 2012, and he needed a bone marrow transplant to survive. And so that sort of put us on this journey of being in the hospital for 263 straight days with him battling. And so that sort of threw a monkey wrench into me pastoring. God and I were in a bloody fist fight for a while, and I didn't feel comfortable leading a church when I was questioning everything at that time. And so I ended up stepping down and turning it over to the co-pastors, and sort of that's what ended up getting me into the speaking world. Was it was just a sort of a transfer from one platform to another, but it was something that, while I had done it for several years, it was a total of probably 4 or 5 years by the time we were all in, that it was the best possible training for me to be a professional speaker.
Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing quite like it. You got to come every week with something fresh and something new and something innovative. And, you can't just have your one set. and
you don't have a keynote as a pastor. Yeah. Right. Like,
it is, old Margaret will find you and say, yeah, you kind of said the same thing last week.
Yeah. I heard you quote that Bible verse 2 weeks ago, Sonny.
That's right. I bequeathed that sofa to be in that spot in 1946. Yeah. And, it was, for me, again, sort of me finding a little bit about who I am what matters most, what my non-negotiables are. And at that time, I really didn't have any of that figured out. And it wasn't until I went through it that I realized I put myself in a horrible position because I didn't have any of that stuff figured out. And so I let my emotions drive the bus, which is just a stupid move, as you know, and made a bunch of horrible decisions during that time that I can't get back, you know? And so it was a couple of years later that I finally decided to figure out what my non-negotiables are. And that process, you know, took me a long time to sort of get to the truth. And once I finally figured it out, it took me another year or two to figure out how to actually use them and not just know what they are.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what led me to the path that I'm on now.
Yeah. So Brant, the non-negotiables, did you have like the support of, like a pastor or a therapist or a coach or like a counselor or, like personal relationships? Like, was that something that you leaned on others to help you with, or is that something that you really came up with that you had to generate for yourself internally?
It's a yes. And I think, you know, we had some incredible support from our church family, during that time, which was great. But, you know, being somebody who comes from a highly competitive background, I had a tendency to just figure I knew better. And so I wasn't much to ask for help. And it was hard for me to accept help. And so it was just one of those things that it took me way longer than it needed to because I was a bullheaded idiot.
Yeah. What is it? I believe, and maybe you can help me. I believe this is biblical, but it's like pride cometh before the fall. Is that, that's biblical, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fascinating, man. So your speaking career now. So like, obviously we're recording this at the end of September, as I mentioned earlier. Speaking, as you know, we know at conferences, I mean, there are in some areas of the country, churches are getting together now. I don't know if you're doing that, but like, what do you, in terms of your speaking stuff, up prior to COVID, what kind of stages were you on? Like if I could, if you said, hey, call me up, said, hey, Jason, like I'm looking for this type of stage. It's my perfect audience. What is that? What does that stage look like? Like who do you like to speak to, and what does that stage look like?
For the past couple of years, I've done mostly business conferences. So sometimes they are associations. So there's a bunch of different companies out there in the audience. Sometimes it's for one particular organization, and it's all of their sales team or their HR team or their, you name it, their IT team, whatever it might be. And, what I talk about with regards to core values is really, to me, one of the pillars of leadership. So it sort of fits no matter what the industry. It's not industry specific. And that has allowed me to speak pretty much everywhere. So, the interesting part for me was, when I finally figured out what these things were for me, these black sheep values. Yeah. What happened was I knew what they were, but I wasn't actually using them. And a couple of years ago, I was speaking at an event where they bring together the top interior designers in the country, 100 of them. And they sort of talk about trends and what's going to be hot this season and all that sort of stuff. And there were two keynotes. There was an opening keynote and I was the closing keynote. The opening keynote was this woman named Paula Zuccotti. And Paula comes from Europe. She is a ethnographer, a product development specialist, and a photographer. And she had written this book called Everything We Touch. And it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. She basically selected 61 different subjects. She sort of followed them around for 24 hours from the moment they woke up to the moment they went to bed. And she documented everything that they touched. Yeah. And like when
you say touched, meaning physically touched? Physically touched.
Yes.
Interesting.
At the end of the day, she gathered every object that was touched and she put it together in one photograph per person. So you could see a 24-hour snapshot in
Wow.
someone's life.
That's
It,
mind blowing.
it really is mind blowing.
That's
And so
insane.
you can
That's amazing.
really start to tell what matters to people when you look at where they're spending their time, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm watching this, my mind is being blown, and I have like this minor panic attack because I'm sitting here going, if somebody followed me around for 24 hours, would they see any evidence of these black sheep values?
Yeah.
And the truth was, maybe at best. And so I walked away from that. And it wasn't until a couple months later, I had this chance meeting with Gary Vaynerchuk.
Gary Vaynerchuk. Here comes Gary Vaynerchuk. I love it.
Right. And so I just finished speaking at this event. I'm at the airport in New York. I think I'm at LaGuardia, and I'm getting out of my
Sorry to hear that.
I know, right? We can't always fly into JFK.
Exactly.
So I'm sitting there. I get out of my car, and I turn around and I look, and the car pulls up behind me. Another car dropping somebody off, and it's Gary V. And so I'm like, again. Yeah, just like Kevin McHale, I can't not say something. It's Gary V.
Right.
So
right.
I walk up and just introduce myself, and honestly, one of the nicest, genuine human beings. You meet some of these people, you see their sort of online persona, and you just aren't quite sure how they're going to be. But he was everything that you wanted him to be, and then some. You know, it really took the time.
That's awesome.
Asked if I wanted to photograph, seriously, took the time to ask questions about me, and just, it was amazing. And so
that's so cool.
After that happened, I sort of started to dig in a little bit more. I knew obviously who he was and VaynerMedia and sort of all of that sort of stuff, and how he sort of diversified himself even into sports. And, he's got his management company now. As I'm reading some stuff, I actually come across this article in the New York Times a couple months after we had met, and it says, Jets owner in waiting will tailgate for now. And, I had found out that Gary's lifelong dream is to buy the New York Jets. And
even still with the way the Jets have been the last few years. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Glutton for punishment. Yes. But he has a plan, right? He knows he's worth a couple $100 million, but that's a pimple on the NFL. It's nothing.
Oh, yeah.
He's got to have a B in front of the Ilion to be a player. And so he's just going to keep his nose down and work hard. And when he finally has that money at around 60, 65, 68 years old, he's going to buy the Jets. They're going to go to 6 Super Bowls. They're going to win 4. He's going to die. And that's like, he's got this plan, right? He's like, this is what he's going to do. And in that article, they interview his brother, AJ. And the journalist says, I got to tell you, man, it's a little bit weird talking to Gary because he sort of just talks about this stuff like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And his brother says, of course he does. He's going to speak it into existence.
Yeah. It's a manifestation.
Right? And so I read that and I went, that's the missing piece. That's the missing piece. I actually have to speak these black sheep values into existence. I have to choose when and where they appear. And so in January of 2019, I started, and I basically took out my calendar every day. I looked at all my appointments, and I literally wrote down. So my black sheep values are creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity. I've got an extra. I've got 6. And so I started to write these things into my calendar, right? Programming when they're going to appear so I can start to make decisions with deliberate intention, right? I am going to manifest these values to appear when I need them to have the maximum impact in my life.
That's awesome.
And so that was January. By June of that year, my speaking events tripled. I went from 20 a year to between 60 and 70 a year.
Yeah.
My fee tripled to speak.
Wow.
I get named by Washington Speaker Bureau, who is one of the most powerful speaker bureaus, if not the most powerful speaker bureau in the country, as one of the top 10 motivational speakers in the country, alongside Jack Nicklaus and Amy Cuddy and Magic Johnson and these incredible people.
Yeah.
And I'm, I have massive, when this happens, I get like imposter syndrome, 10x. It's just,
Oh, I can imagine.
I'm just sitting there going, it's awesome, but I'm going, how did I end up on this list? And it's taken me a good year to figure this out. But the truth, Jason, is this, is that the fact that I've done the work to truly discover my non-negotiables and I'm speaking them into existence is just as rare as Nicholas winning 18 majors.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that way, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And so that has allowed me, I went from speaking to a couple hundred people to, before COVID, I was, my average audience was probably 2,000 people. And so, all of a sudden I'm on the main stage, I'm the main keynote, it's a whole different ball game, but it's because I am being deliberate with my intention. And that's what really led me to write this book, Black Sheep, to help people discover their own flock so that they can start to do the same.
It's amazing, man. So let's, so today's a big day for you.
Today
I'd love to hear a little. Tell us more, Brant. Tell us more.
Today is the official launch. It is available in stores. So go to your Barnes and Noble, your Books A Million, and walk in and say, "Give me Black Sheep." It is here. It's been a year-long journey with my publisher, Page Two, out of Vancouver, and just an amazing partnership with them. And we've been working on this for so long. And today is the official launch day. So we have waited and waited, and it's finally here. And so now. Anybody can go and get it. And I'm just super excited for people to get this book and start to ask themselves some really important questions.
What's the actual name of it?
The book is called Black Sheep: Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You.
Yeah, I am. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check it out on Amazon. It's available via Kindle and Barnes & Noble book. Awesome. Well, congratulations. We were catching up for a few minutes before we started today, and I don't want to write a book. I don't like writing.
Yes.
So, the idea of sitting down and writing 300 to 400 pages. And I also have like a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, who wants to hear what's in this brain, 300 or 400 pages, but I always have a great admiration for people that can get those thoughts out on paper, and a huge congratulations to you. I have no doubt it's going to be awesome. In the podcast show notes, we'll provide a link to the book and make sure that it's really apparent where people can pick that up. And seriously, Brant, a huge congratulations to you. It's a no small feat. And probably when you were out there selling your solar water softeners or water heaters, you probably didn't imagine you'd be on a keynote speaker talking to Gary Vaynerchuk and have a book on Amazon and at Barnes and Noble.
No, that is most certainly not what I ever guessed would have been reality. So yeah, it's a little surreal, and it's led to, I've done a couple of years worth of this is what I call values coaching, right? So it's sort of helping people get to these non-negotiables, and just getting ready now to do my largest group training ever.
Nice.
So we're looking at between 150 and 200 people that starts on Thursday, October 1st. And it's going to be a free training sponsored by Association Chat and Book Thinkers. And it's available to anybody. And it's just one of these things where we're going to help people walk. It's a 5-week program every Thursday in the month of October. And we are just going to try to get people to discover their Black Sheep values.
That's awesome. Are you, so we haven't talked about this yet, but we're actually having a baby in 2 weeks. So like this October for me is a little jam-packed here starting in a couple weeks.
You kidding me?
Just a new human being in the world. No big deal. No problem. But are you planning to run this program? Is this a one-time thing? Are you going to be running, depending on how it goes, you're going to run it again sometime?
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to do it again, for sure. And to be honest with you, we're looking at sort of rolling it out as a course.
Nice.
That could be on demand once
that makes sense.
Once this is done. You bet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, Brant. Well, I'm going to start to wrap up here in the next few minutes, but I do have a couple other questions for you if you have a few more minutes for us.
You bet.
All right. What is the thing in your life that you're most proud of? And obviously you've done a lot. You got the fam, you got the music, you got the speaking, book came out today. What's the thing that you're most proud of?
My kids.
If I was a betting person, I would have said that. That is, it's, you know, I know you do a lot of podcast interviews and you have a podcast. I ask this question of almost everybody. Parents, it's 100% of the time they're kids, 100%, no matter who they are. And if they're not parents, then you get a million different answers. So like for those who are listening, who do not have children and want children, that should tell you something.
Yeah, it is, you know, especially with what we went through. You know, I've got Theo, my oldest, is, you know, has beat cancer and continues. He's got a kidney transplant now, and that he has successfully had, and, you know, fighting his way back. And he's just, you know, one of my heroes. He's just absolutely unbelievable. And my youngest, who could have used this experience that sort of happened to us as a crutch to make some really bad decisions and take a different path, ended up, you know, graduating high school #1 in his class, and now he's in college on a full ride.
Nice.
That's a brain scholarship, not a bronze scholarship like his dad had. And
I like that.
You know, to me, like that, those two are just, I'm incredibly proud of them both for, you know, weathering this storm that happened to us that we didn't ask for, and doing it with grace and humility is just amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. And well, best wishes to you and the family around that. That's super cool. It was funny. I was thinking to myself, I was actually going to ask you, hey, do you want to brag on your kids for a minute? But you were proactive with that, so I didn't have to ask you.
Yes.
All right. Another question I have for you, and I call this the vulnerability question. I think you'll be down for this based on what we've talked about today. What's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
I'm a perfectionist. And I care a little bit too much. And I think it's both, again, and I'm going to say this with as much humility / rock star swagger as I can, which is, I think it's what has made me as successful as I've been, and also been the #1 biggest hurdle in my life.
Yeah. So is it it's like I see this a lot. I coach mostly high perform, like almost all my, not even most, all my clients are high performers. Like they're highly educated, do well. And this is always the fine line. And I kind of consider myself in the same vein of like, where does your, what's the word I'm looking for? Where does your constant striving for being the best actually hurt you? And again, it goes back to what's the cliche about perfection perfect is the enemy of progress.
Yeah.
Can you think back on times in your life where that you can be like, oh man, if I just would have went and done the thing instead of having to have it be perfect, it would have been, you know, it would have made such a difference.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I mean, so the biggest learn for me over the last couple of years, and this is really hard as a grade A control freak of the highest level. I always tell people, you have not really met a control freak like me.
That's quite the introduction,
right? If you asked me to dinner, Jason, I would say sure, and I would drive your car.
My God, that's the level. I'm gonna call that straight neuroses. That's outside of like, that's straight neurotic.
It is very much. I get uncomfortable when I don't have control. And so for me, the most difficult sort of learn over the last couple of years is that I don't control outcomes. That to me, as I got into studying more of what outcome bias was and how we don't really control outcomes, we can only control the deliberate intention that goes into making decisions. But once the decision is made, it's out of our hands. That was a massive challenge for me to let that go. But when I did, and I shifted my focus from controlling an outcome to honoring these black sheep values, well, that's when everything changed.
It's not surprising to me at all, especially being like a speaker. At the end of the day, like, you know, in the kind of industry that you're in, or even what I do, like all you can do is be yourself.
Yep.
Like you're going to speak on you're going to have your topics that you speak on. You're going to have like your persona in real life and on stage, which hopefully it's authentic. And I'm, you know, knowing what I know about, you know, I'm sure it is.
Sure.
But like at the end of the day, you can't control whether that event producer hires you or not. Like you can't actually control that.
That's
and
true.
There's actually it's funny you call it black sheep. Have you ever read the book? God, I'm drawing a blank on it. It's the Chris Voss negotiation book.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm drawing a blank, and I've read it twice, and I'm just late in the day. He has a thing. And the name of his consulting company is the Black Swan Group.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you read about this?
Yeah. Yes. Never split the difference? Is that I can't.
Never split the difference. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea is in any negotiation, and let's be clear, when you or your agent or your speakers bureau is going out and offering you as an option for an event, they're negotiating on your behalf. There's always a black swan.
Yes.
And the black swan is that the other side has a piece of information that you do not know in the negotiation.
Yes.
You don't know it. And sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's like, hey, my friend knows somebody. Sometimes it's like they're humoring you because they want a favor. And like, this is the thing I would say, like coaching around like control.
Yeah.
And like and we call this like being attached to the outcome.
Yes.
It's a killer for, it's a killer for people. It sounds like it was a killer for you for a while. And man, it like what I'm hearing in all this is like, you just have a greater sense of ease. It must be so much more delightful not to be like, hey, like I'm doing my thing. I have faith in who I am. And like, like God's looking out for me. And like, now you just to sit back and be like, it's going to happen. Now it's going to happen because I've showed up in my best.
That's right. And
that's awesome, man.
And to be able to sleep at night, knowing that I made a good decision that had zero to do with an outcome is just like, so much easier to navigate life that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, that you actually, I've had kids and it still took you a while to get there. Cause I feel like having children is a good way to not be so attached to outcomes for most people. Cause like, you're like, oh, we have a 4-year-old. She's a little human being now and has all sorts of opinions and things she wants to do. And like, I can't control the outcome of whether she's going to want to wake up for school or not tomorrow.
That's it.
I can lay the hammer down.
Yes.
But I don't want to do that.
Right.
So yeah, man, that's cool. But I think if the world was not so attached to outcomes and actually we just show up at our best and then go like, hey, it's out of my hands, I think it'd be a lot more valuable because there's just so much control in the world. So much control. And
we'd find that we actually perhaps share a value or two, which is always nice in the process.
Crazy.
Right? Find some common ground.
Yeah, what a bold concept. Like? And we all actually, like all of us, and this is such a timely topic because tonight is literally the first presidential debate.
Yes.
Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, like, it wouldn't be interesting if we all just kind of showed up and like, hey, we're all humans. We have some basic needs and maybe we could all come together and figure out how to make this work for all of us.
100%. I feel like it's the number one reason why the country is as divided as it is that nobody knows what they really care about. And so they know what they feel, but that is not going to get it done, as is obvious.
There you go. Brant for president. You heard it here first.
No, thanks.
That's not a place you want to wade into.
That is never you. The minute if I ever call you and go, I'm thinking about getting into politics, you need to just, again, full license to take me out.
All right. I'm gonna play this back and say, hey, Brant, remember when you were on the podcast near the end of 2020? Don't do it, man. Don't do it.
No.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'd love to wrap up by having you share with the audience all the different places they can connect with you. So,
sure.
First thing, you already talked about it. You got the book. First thing, go connect at Barnes & Noble with Brant's new book or on Amazon, wherever you get your books.
Sure.
Amazing. Where else can people find out about you if they want to either book you for speaking, want to connect with you personally, check out your courses, all that good stuff you're up to?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple different places. So you can, the website for the book is called findyourblacksheep.com. And on that site, you can also take an online assessment that helps you sort of dip your toe into the values pool and discover your initial flock of 5 that will need some proving, but it'll at least get the conversation started for you. And my website is simply brantmenswar.com, BrantMenswar. And all my social handles are just at Brant Menswar across the board.
Yeah. Because you're probably the only Brant Menswar on the planet, would be my guess.
That's my guess. That is my guess.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, for the audience listening, we'll be sure and put everything here in the show notes so you don't have to remember this. So, Brant, I just want to thank you for coming on today and having a really awesome conversation. It was great getting to know you. And I have a tradition on the show that I'm hoping you can indulge me in. And I have a feeling you will. I love when my guests leave the audience with some words of wisdom. And the words of wisdom should be like on a Post-it note, or for the newer generation, like an Instagram post is the new Post-it note. So what are the words of wisdom you want to leave us with today?
You have a choice to keep winging it or change what's possible. And the choice is yours. Yeah,
that's awesome, Brant. Well, again, congratulations on everything. Congratulations on the book launch today. Really exciting. And can't wait to start following you, see what you're up to in the future. And I have no doubt that we'll be running into each other sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks so much, Brant.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.